Thank you so much for spending this time this evening. I'm excited to walk through different parts of the FAFSA process, a lot of things that will be helpful for you to know as you're navigating through it. Now, I know we might have a wide variety of audiences here, whether it's parents, whether it's students, whether it may be even high school counselors. And even with students, some of whom may have already applied to college and those who are upcoming in the next year or two or a few years. So I want to keep it comprehensive in a way that focuses on the most important parts of the FAFSA process, of understanding the different elements of it, and ultimately what you need to know and to think about as you're reporting, as you're filling this out, as you're reporting it. And then we'll share as well some tips and tricks just to make sure that you know what to go into the process expecting. So I want to address the overall timeline of federal student aid first. Ultimately, what is the FAFSA? Some of you, again, may have already filled it out or are familiar with it, but the components that are needed, what you need to collect. And then we're going to spend a bulk of our time actually walking through different sections of the FAFSA and identifying some of the key aspects that are important for you to know about as you're going through this process. We'll then share a little bit, I'll share a little bit more about what happens after the fact, and then I want to leave time for questions. If you do have questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A. I'll keep an eye out on the Q&A as I'm able. If we're not able to get to the questions, all of the questions that are posed here, I'll make sure to provide detailed answers after the fact. The webinar is being recorded. We will send it out to you so you don't have to worry too much. You're welcome to take notes, of course, but you don't have to worry about capturing everything, especially because there are some specific links that I'll address that I would love for you to click on and to explore further. You'll be able to get the presentation. We'll send a follow-up early next week. And so just keep that in mind. Again, if there are questions we're not able to answer, I'll get through as many as I can. I'll provide answers after the fact in that follow-up email. So let's run through just the timeline of the financial aid process. If there are any seniors in the room or parents of seniors in the room, then you may know this well. The process started much earlier, several months ago. FAFSA opens on October 1st. That is when you first are encouraged to focus on financial aid, maybe early because you're focusing on the admissions process as well. However, filling out FAFSA is a critical part of the overall timeline. You'll get the student aid index as well shortly after you submit your FAFSA. And from there, that number is what is used to calculate your financial aid award. Again, you'll then apply to colleges at any point, whether in the early process or the regular process. A lot of the regular decision deadlines have just passed fairly recently. And then you'll get a financial aid package, usually around, if not at the same time that admissions decisions released, around the same time, maybe a little bit after the fact. Then you can actually appeal your financial aid. We're going to talk through specific reasons why that might be the case. We have an entire webinar on appealing financial aid as well, so I won't get too much into it, but we'll talk briefly about that. And then by May 1st, students decide where they want to enroll. At that point in time, if there are any funding gaps, it's important to think about other opportunities that are available for the student and for the family, from additional scholarship opportunities, whether from the school or external scholarships from outside organizations. It may be necessary to consider loans as part of that process. Again, both federal loans and potentially private loans if needed. Our goal is not to encourage sort of students to take on unnecessary levels of debt. Loans are always a last resort. And so we want to maximize grants and scholarships first and foremost. We want to maximize how much financial aid you can get through the appeals process based on information that you submit in the FAFSA, potentially appropriate reasons why you might need to appeal if you may have made some mistakes in reporting. And then typically around or a little bit before the start of school, tuition due dates will be due late August, early September, depending on the time frame that the school starts. Now, today's topic will be focused on the FAFSA. I mentioned we have other webinars upcoming. Student Aid Index webinar we're actually hosting next week. Appealing Financial Aid, we're hosting the week after, so I'd invite you to those. All of our webinars are on our website. It's joinjuno.com/webinars. They're always free. They're always open to everyone. Invite your friends. We want to spread the word far and wide on some of the most important pieces of information that you all need to know as you're navigating through the process. And then again, we'll focus on what to do if you do need to take out loans, how you might approach that before the tuition deadline is due. So let's jump in. As we think about what the FAFSA is, a few important notes. It is the free application for federal student aid, so you should never pay for FAFSA. It's implied in the name, but again, just be aware of that. The website that you'll use is studentaid.gov, the government website, and it gives you access to various different types of financial aid. Certainly, it allows you to provide all the information and documentation that's needed that colleges will use to determine their financial aid awards. And it also allows you access to certain types of loans, which are other types of aid that can be available to your family through the federal government. It does need to be completed every single year. So if you are a current college student, if you have a child who's a current college student, you filled it out once. The important note is that FAFSA is annual. So because there are changes in family circumstances, the FAFSA wants to be able to account for that. And so not every situation is static, as we know, and especially not over the course of 4 years. Now, if you're not expecting financial aid, or you're not sure, maybe you don't need to take out loans, then don't think that you still don't need to fill out the FAFSA. It can still be important. And what I want to emphasize here is that there are schools that may require the FAFSA for merit scholarships, for example. And just having it on file is what's necessary so that they can take their appropriate measures in documenting all their sources of funding, where it's coming from, and where it's going across their entire student population. So the FAFSA can still be important, even if you're not expecting to qualify for aid, if you think your family's income is too high. The other point that I'll mention as well is, even if you do think your income is too high or your savings might be too high, you could be pleasantly surprised. Any amount of federal aid could be advantageous. Again, whether it's some sort of need-based aid where you may think your income is too high, but in the context of the college admissions process, it actually isn't relative to their overall student population and student body. But it also allows you access to certain types of loans, which may be more advantageous, for example. So as we think about that type of those different types of aid, you'll see the top three here are based on financial need. So depending on your income and your assets, you can qualify for a Pell Grant, which is up to $7,395. That's the maximum, and it's varied. It's scaled up from that. So you may qualify for $3,000 in Pell Aid, depending on where your income and assets are. This is free money that doesn't have to be paid back. So the more we can access those free funds, the better, because that'll reduce your overall cost to the family. Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants are also typically reserved for the students that come from the highest need background. And so this is additional supplemental grant money that the college has available to distribute and to disperse to their students that need the most financial aid. Again, that does not have to be paid back. It's free money. And additionally, students can qualify for federal work study. It ranges between $1,000 to $5,000. This is a campus job that is effectively subsidized by the federal government. So it's paid through the federal work study program. So again, these are all access. This is all access to free funds that is made available to students through the FAFSA. Now, the bottom two that you'll see on this list are loans. So they're not free money anymore. They do have to be paid back. Direct loans are available to all students. And so we have a presentation that goes very in depth on this. I'll just say students can qualify, current college students can qualify up to $5,500 freshman year, $6,500 their sophomore year, and then $7,500 their junior and senior year. So it does increase by $1,000. And then it caps at $7,500. These are loans that are taken out in the student's name, so they are the ones that are responsible for them. They do have to be paid back, However, there are advantages to the direct loan program for the student's name. There are opportunities for loan forgiveness depending on the industry and the type of work that a student does afterwards. They may be eligible if they're working in the public sector to have their loans forgiven after making consistent payments over 10 years. So that is a great benefit of the direct loan program. It's something that we talk about a lot with our families and students. And in addition to that is the Parent Plus loan program. This is a loan in the parent's name directly, so it's not associated with the student at all. There have been significant changes that I'll mention briefly in our presentation here, where the Parent Plus program has changed from last year as a result of the Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed this past July of last year. They've made fairly comprehensive changes to the Parent Plus loan program. Previously, you'd be able to borrow up to the cost of attendance. Now there is a $65,000 lifetime cap per student. So again, these are loans that do have to be paid back. I'll share a little bit more a few slides over. Now, FAFSA will also give students and families access to state financial aid programs and any additional aid programs that schools specifically have. So various colleges and universities may have additional sources of funding at their disposal. So that's why it's important to fill out the FAFSA, regardless of whether you think you'll qualify or not. We encourage families to fill it out early. So again, you may have just applied to a school by, let's say, the January 10th regular decision deadline. If so, I highly encourage you to work on your FAFSA as soon as possible. The federal deadline is much later out. So if we think about a current high school senior now who just applied to college, they will actually have access to FAFSA funding all the way through the end of their freshman year of college. So that's why the official deadline you see here is well into the future, June 30th, 2027, because you could technically borrow, let's say, second semester of your freshman year in college if you need to. Maybe the family decides they don't need to borrow their first semester, they pay from their cash savings, but then the subsequent semester they might need to take out a Parent Plus loan, for example. So these funds are supposed to be available to the student throughout the entirety of their academic year. So that's why you'll see that. But we do encourage students, if you know you may need additional funding at any point, apply early because financial aid is not unlimited, unfortunately. There are some federal programs that do run out of money, particularly state programs as well, that are on a first come, first served basis. And so here's an example of the hyperlink. So when you get the presentation, you can follow all these hyperlinks on various deadlines that states have. Some of them will say on the website, apply as soon as possible. Apply as soon after FAFSA opens on October 1st to be considered for the available funds that are available. So that's why we really, really encourage you to start early. And then again, various schools have their own deadlines. It's likely, again, I'll talk to if there are any current seniors or parents of current seniors in the room. It's likely that you've already seen and you may well be aware of the school's institutional deadlines, which may have been the same time as the admissions deadline, maybe a week later or a couple days later. That is on purpose because financial officers want to be able to calculate your financial aid award quickly and be able to turn that around to be presented with your admissions decisions or soon after you receive admissions decisions. So universities have a much earlier deadline than the federal deadline because again, with federal deadlines, as long as you apply, you can have access to Parent Plus loan programs, for example. Institutions, so universities and colleges will use the FAFSA to determine how they might allocate both federal aid, but also institutional aid, the funds that they have available in their financial aid program to give out to families. Now, what do you need to actually complete the FAFSA? And we'll talk about who needs to submit information. The FAFSA uses a language called a contributor, which is a person who is required to provide their information for the FAFSA application. So every contributor has to fill out the FAFSA in order for it to be considered finished. Now, I'll start here because this is what students will see first when they actually sign in to studentaid.gov and begin the process. What is important to determine first and foremost is whether the student is an independent student or considered a dependent student. And what I want to mention here is that this is not related at all to whether a student is listed as a dependent for tax purposes. So this is a completely separate process. And what is FAFSA is trying to determine here is if a student does have a parent in their life or sort of a legal, sort of an adopted parent. We'll get into this a little in just the next slide. But if the student has someone in their life for whom is responsible for the student, if that's not the case, then the student is on their own. There are different loan and grant funding options available to students if they are considered independent. So what that means is that a student might be born before January 1, 2003. So they're an older student, for example. If they're married at the time of application, if they're a graduate student, they're automatically considered an independent student. Active military, for example, if they were an orphan or a foster child or a ward of the court, an emancipated minor, or homeless or at risk of homelessness. So again, these are pretty high bars that the FAFSA sets in order to determine whether or not a student is independent. Now, if the student is not considered independent, then either one or both parents will need to fill out the FAFSA. So in that case, from there, we decide it's important to determine who then counts as a contributor on the FAFSA. So the FAFSA, the Department of Education actually has an incredibly helpful tool that I'll highlight here. It's hyperlinked, and you fill out a little bit of information, and it creates this little chart that says, if this is the case, then this. So for example, if parents are living together, they're married and filing taxes jointly, then only one of the parents is a contributor, and only that parent needs to fill out FAFSA information. Both parents in that circumstance, married filing jointly, both parents do not need to complete the FAFSA, only one. Now, we get a lot of questions on what happens with separation or divorce. And so I'll just address that quickly because it is such a common question we get. So in that situation, if parents are separated or divorced, then only one parent fills out the FAFSA. So for purposes of who is considered the contributing parent on the FAFSA, in separation or divorce, only one of those parents will fill out the FAFSA. Now, this is going to be the parent who provides more than 50% of the financial support for the student. So it's not necessarily tied to who the student lives with most of the year. In a lot of cases, it can be the parent with whom the student lives, because if they're living in your home and you're providing their everyday needs, it can be the case, but it is not always, and it's not automatically the case where the household that the student lives in is considered the contributing parent. It could be that the separated parent or the divorced parent is providing significant financial support for that student. So it's over the last 12 months, who has provided more than 50% of the financial support for that student. So I want to make that really clear, because again, it's a very specific definition. And again, please use the Department of Ed tool in any of those questions of who is considered a contributor for the purposes of the FAFSA. There's more involved in terms of if one of the parent has remarried and there's a step parent involved. So there's a lot of different scenarios there. Now, again, the parent that is considered the legal parents are either the biological or adoptive parents. That is who the FAFSA considers as a parent. If a student lives with a grandparent, foster parent, a legal guardian even, that is not considered a parent on the FAFSA. Only in cases where someone has legally adopted the student will that person be considered a parent for the FAFSA. So then the student will need to create an FSA ID as the primary driver of the application. And then they will also invite their contributor. So it could be one of their parents, for example. It could be an adoptive parent. So in that case, it's important to collect all your documents. We'll get to to that in a moment. But the student will need a social security number to begin the FAFSA application. A parent does not need a social security number to move forward with it. There's a different pathway if that's the case, if you don't have a social security number as a parent, but the student will. And so that will then give, once the student goes through the process, they'll create an FSA ID, and that is required in order to move forward with the FAFSA. Now, the change that happened this year is that because of the Social Security match, that will allow for an instant verification of the process. And so a student will be able to begin their FAFSA instead of having to wait a few days, which was the case prior. Now, here are some of the documents that are listed, that will be listed on the FAFSA as things that you need to collect. Again, collecting your tax returns, any records of untaxed income. We'll get into this a lot in terms of what assets you should report. And then you do need at least one school in order to actually submit the FAFSA. You can list up to 20. You don't have to list 20, but you need at least one school listed on the FAFSA to be able to submit it. Okay, so we want to spend the bulk of our time here actually going through certain sections of the FAFSA. So I mentioned again, the student will typically drive the process and start the application after they get their FSA ID, and then they can invite the parent as a contributor. It doesn't have to start with the student. The parent can start, and then the student, once they create their FSA ID, they would then invite the parent as a collaborator on the FAFSA form. But as we go through this, this will be the first thing that you'll see. You have to consent to transferring your data, your tax data from FAFSA. And so if you don't do this, your FAFSA will not get, if you try to send it out, it won't get sent out. So this is a requirement to be considered eligible for aid. So you have to connect your information from the IRS to the FAFSA because it pull in a lot of the information. This will actually make it much easier for you to fill out the FAFSA because it'll auto-populate a lot of the fields. You don't have to go, cell, this cell to this cell. It'll actually make your life a lot easier. It'll shorten the time that's required to fill out FAFSA. This actually is a beneficial change for students and families because it allows you to have accurate information and go through it much quicker. Okay, so as we go through the different sections, I want to spend time on each of them in terms of what you'll see once you actually log in and start filling out the FAFSA. Now, the personal circumstances, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Ultimately, this is meant to determine whether a student is considered independent for the purposes of the FAFSA. So some of these that we had addressed earlier, if the student's active duty, if a student has been awarded the court, if they were in foster care, if there is any kind of risk of homelessness, then that student will be considered, can be considered independent. If not, if they are not, then the parent will be expected to fill out their information as a contributor. The second section you'll see is demographic information. This does not impact financial aid at all. This is just background information that is collected. It's not sent to colleges. And so this is just, you can move through this fairly quickly. This has no bearing on any kind of financial aid award. Okay, now as we get into the financials piece, the income questions that you'll be asked are based on, if you're filling the FAFSA out this year, they're going to be based on 2024 tax information. So colleges will use, and the FAFSA uses what's called prior year. So it's information from 2 years ago that will be used in the application, in the FAFSA application process. So that's meant, this change was made several years ago at this point now, and it was made to limit the amount of appeals that were necessary based on the timing of when someone may have filled out their tax, they may have done their taxes, and whether or not they've did it on the earlier side or the later side. So information from 2 years ago is required from the FAFSA. If your situation is very different than where it was 2 years ago, we'll talk about that in a moment. That's a reason to appeal. But whatever the situation is, you will still need the information from prior year in order to fill out information. Then adjustments can be made after appeal. You can appeal your financial aid after the fact. But that's what will get pulled in as well, your 2024 tax return information if you're applying this year. So you'll see questions as well about your assets. So what's important to know is that different from income is from prior year, from 2 years ago. Assets are reported based on the value of the day you submit the FAFSA. So it's current, the most current information that you have. So it's a big difference between the two. You'll usually include the value of cash, any savings or checking accounts, investment accounts, businesses and investment farms, for example. We'll have a comprehensive list. You generally will not include the value of your primary residence or any retirement accounts. So as we jump into that then, as I mentioned, fill out this information when you're asked about savings based on the day you fill out the FAFSA. So if you decide to fill it out tomorrow, then collect all the documentation that you need, all the information to see what is the cash value, the cash balance sitting in your savings account, in your checking account as of tomorrow, if that's when you choose to fill it out. What's important to know, though, is you don't fill out information on any kind of possessions that you may have. So it could be a car or cars. It could be any artwork, and unless you are an art investor, that could be an exception. But if you just have, around your house any kind of valuable artwork, this does not include any kind of jewelry that you may own. So these types of possessions are not counted and they're not reported as assets on the FAFSA. Just a really important distinction, because what I want to communicate is that we've seen and we've talked to families who are overinflating or I should say over-reporting their various different assets that they may have when they're actually not supposed to. And so if that's the case, then the value of your assets will be much higher than what you should be reporting. Therefore, colleges will see that, and the final calculation, the student aid number will be higher, which will then reduce the amount of financial aid that you may qualify for. So what's really important as we go through the next several slides here is to think about what you should be including and what you shouldn't be including. Because I was actually just talking to a parent fairly recently, last week, that reported the value of their primary residence, which you absolutely should not do. That is a huge, that would be considered a huge asset if you're reporting your primary residence. But in that case, FAFSA does not expect you to fill out any information around your primary residence. So next, as we look at investments, what you should be reporting, and I actually just see a question here as well, directly about 529s, if that should be added as an asset. And yes, absolutely, the 529 should be added as an asset, and it should only be added as the 529 in the student's name. Any other investments that should be added are ESAs or any trust funds, mutual funds, other stocks, for example, cryptocurrency, and also the net worth of any investment real estate. And this is not a primary home. This applies if you have a second home, a vacation home, maybe you have a condo somewhere that you're renting out, but it's not your primary residence. You want to report the net value of that because it will be considered an investment asset at that point. So that means if we were to Zillow your, let's say you have a condo somewhere, and we were to Zillow it and it comes out to an estimated total sale price, if you were to sell it today, it'd be worth $300,000. But maybe you have a $200,000 mortgage still left on it. Then you would subtract that, the current sale price value minus whatever mortgage you have, and you would only report $100,000. You would not report the entire $300,000. Because again, this is another piece where we see families making mistakes, is over-reporting or over-inflating the value of various assets that they should be reporting, but they're reporting the total value, not the net value. So you want to make sure to subtract any kind of debts that are on any of these, any types of properties you might have, any mortgages, and only report the net value. Now, what might be more interesting here is actually what not to report. We talked about this in terms of your primary home. You also don't want to report any retirement accounts. Retirement is considered protected income for the purposes of the FAFSA. So colleges are not expecting parents to dip into their retirement savings in order to pay for college. So anything that currently exists in your retirement account, then that is considered protected. So any ABLE accounts, life insurance should not be included. Now, what's interesting here as well, I want to emphasize this, is 529 plans that are not owned by a parent or a student. So so again, to emphasize, 529 plans owned by a parent or a student should be reported as an asset. If there is someone else outside of that who is very generous and decides to open up a 529 plan, whether it's a grandparent, any other relative, a very awesome, generous friend, if that's the case, nowhere on the FAFSA are you asked to report this information. So this is a little tip that could be important and potentially significant depending on the value of the 529 plan. So if that's the case, this is not reported anywhere on the FAFSA. So you can think about how you might be able to maximize and strategically leverage various options that are available to you and your family in order to think about how to reduce the overall assets that are reported. Because again, the assets along with your income will be used to calculate your final financial aid package. Now, what's also important here is to not report any 529 accounts for other children. Don't report the cumulative 529 plans. If you have 3 children, don't report the cumulative value of all 3 plans. Only the 529 plan for the student that is in the name of the student applying to college. If you have twins, for example, and they each have their own 529 plans, only report the value of the 529 plan per child's name, not the value of both, not the value of any other plans. Now, as we think about businesses and investment farms, you would report the net worth of businesses if you have more than 100 full-time or equivalent employees. And then again, if the net worth of any income-producing farms that you own that are not excluded. So for example, it would be excluded if it is the primary residence, if it's a family's primary residence. So again, if you won't report the asset of a business with fewer than 100 employees, or if you live on the farm. This is a change from last year. So if anyone attended any of our sessions in the past, this is a change that came through the federal legislation over the summer. And so it has important implications for many families if you do own your own business. All right, I saw a question that came in about the 401ks. So again, just to emphasize, you don't report the value of a 401k, 403b, or any type of retirement accounts. So as we think about family size, what's important is if your family size has changed in any way since your 2024 taxes were filed, then it's really important to update it here. Family size does have an important role in financial aid calculations. The federal government expects and has certain income protections based on family size. So if you're a family of 4, they have certain allocations based on the cost of, general cost of living and what you might be expected, to sort of general expenses and what you might be expected to pay as a family of 4. Similarly, as a family of 5, as a family of 6. So the larger your family, that has direct impact on the student aid index number, which is again used to ultimately calculate your financial aid package. And the larger your family is, the more aid you could qualify for if it has increased. A common question that we get as well is if you have a current student in college and one in high school who's applying this year to college, what is your family size considered? Is it, let's say there's a 2-parent household with 2 children, one in college, one currently a high school senior. You would still report a family size of 4. It hasn't decreased because your child is away. You're still responsible for them. Yes, they are living out. They may be living on campus outside of your home, but they're still a dependent. They're still considered dependent. So your family size would still be four. On the flip side of it, if let's say a family has taken in an elderly grandparent to the student who's applying, uh, it could be possible to consider that an increase in family size as well. So there are certain stipulations and qualifications that have to be met. So the parent does have to live in the home, the grandparent, excuse me, does have to live in the home. The family does have to provide more than 50% of their of care for that grandparent, and the grandparent does have to be considered a dependent on the parents' taxes. And that's very specific again, because I mentioned that important distinction. Just having a grandparent living in the home doesn't necessarily qualify for an increased family size. So for example, a grandparent they may be retired, but they may get all of their income through a pension or a retirement account. They may still be working a grandparent can still be working, for example. So there are specific regulations and stipulations on who can be considered in the increase in family size if they are grandparents, or whether they qualify or not. Now, the number in college question no longer has a direct impact on your financial aid award in the way that it's calculated first time around on the FAFSA. This was a big change previously. Before the FAFSA Simplification Act. Previously, the number of students in college had a drastic role. So if you had two children in college, effectively it would divide the available parent income and assets in two, one for each child in college. However, what's important here is whatever you fill in on this box isn't going to be considering the financial aid calculations directly first time around. However, still fill it out accurately. If you have, in the example that I mentioned, two parents and one student currently in college, one a high school senior now who's applying, still fill this out accurately, because colleges will allow you to appeal. You can appeal your financial award based on this number. Understandably, sort of common sense, if you have two children who are about to be in college, maybe one is a junior when the other is a first year in college, parent resources are limited. It's not the same as leveraging the full income and assets towards one child, and then those very same assets towards the second child. Clearly, there has to be a distribution across both children, and so this is a primary reason where families can appeal and should absolutely appeal through the special circumstances appeal. So financial officers will see that you filled out, one other child in college, maybe two other children in college, and from there they're able to use professional judgment. They're able to document the information that you provide in order to reassess your financial aid package. Now, as we think about colleges, I mentioned that you have to list at least one college or trade school on the FAFSA. You can list up to 20. If you apply to more than 20 colleges, you can certainly, you can still fill out the FAFSA. You would send it out to the first 20 institutions. And then once that's sent out, you can clear those off your list. I encourage just waiting a few days before you do that to just ensure that it gets sent out appropriately and that there's no mistakes or errors. And then after that, you can clear them off your list and then add, let's say, the next 5 if you're applying to 25 schools. As a former college counselor myself and former admissions officer, I don't recommend applying to over 20 schools. It's a lot of work, but I also recognize that students might be doing that. So what is key here to understand is that some states do have specific requirements for the order that you list these schools on the FAFSA. It can have implications for eligibility for state aid programs. Now, one example I'll mention too. So you'll see here, there's a screenshot of Massachusetts. The hyperlink is here. Please make sure to click on this hyperlink when we send you this, the slides so that you can check for your school whether there are implications for ordering and state eligibility. A lot of states, I will say, they don't have any kind of requirement, so I don't mean to startle anyone here. However, it is really important if your home state does have this ordering eligibility criteria to absolutely list a public institution from your home state in the first spot. That is always the safest spot. So for example, in Massachusetts, you'll see the description here. In Vermont, you have to list a Vermont school within the first 3 spots of your FAFSA school list. So please pay attention to that. It is not something that is really ever talked about, but please make sure to just check if your state has this eligibility ordering requirement. Okay, then after that, every contributor has to sign and submit the FAFSA once all the sections are complete. Now, I want to make sure this sounds like an easy step, but please double, triple check, because let's say if both parents do have to be contributors, then then make sure that the student signs and both parents do sign. It can be easy to forget, so just double, triple check to make sure everything is submitted and that you receive the confirmation email. Each contributor will also have to sign. So again, just make sure you dot all your T's, excuse me, dot all your I's and cross all your T's to make sure every step is formally submitted so that the FAFSA can then be sent to institutions, the colleges that are on your list. Afterwards, you will get a FAFSA submission summary, so you can log in with your account information. You can proceed to the View FAFSA submission summary and then go to the Eligibility Overview tab. And that will show you then any kind of eligibility for federal grant resources, so Pell Grants, for example, any federal student loans. And then it'll also show the student aid index number. So the student aid index is just a number that's used to calculate your financial aid award. It's not the number that you're expected to pay for college. I want to be really clear. This is a change. The student aid index is a change as well. Used to be called the estimated family contribution. If anyone in the room has older children who went through the process, it used to be the estimated family contribution. That no longer exists. It's the student aid index number. And that's a number from negative 1,500 to a really large number. So the lower the number is, the higher your financial need. So schools will use this in order to allocate their any kind of federal aid, state aid, and their own institutional aid. What it's not, again, it's not your financial aid award. It doesn't tell you how much aid you'll receive. It's not a financial aid offer. We have an entire presentation actually on the student aid index. It's going to be the one next week. And so I encourage you to join that. We go in depth on how it's calculated, what you can expect. And so it's just the starting point that the financial aid office uses to determine how much aid they can share with families. Just to emphasize again, it's not your financial aid award. It's a very common misconception. I just want to reiterate it again. Some key things to remember, and again, we'll wrap it up. If you do have any questions, please be sure to include those in the Q&A. So a few key thoughts to remember. If you are planning, for example, a large purchase or need to make a large purchase in the near future, you can think about a strategic timing of any of those kinds of purchases. So maybe your car is breaking down and you know that you need a new car in the very near future. And let's say you haven't, I'll talk to, again, using the example of a current high school senior. If the FAFSA has not yet been required by your institution, maybe it's required in February, then you can think really closely and critically on what is the right time for you to think about that new car purchase. Maybe your roof is leaking, right? And maybe it's not, hopefully it's not an emergency situation, because then you clearly, it would need to be changed hopefully right away. But if if there is a small leak, if there is significant damage, then you can think about leveraging your current available assets to pay for those types of purchases. And that would then reduce the amount of available savings that you have to report as an asset on the FAFSA. So it may not make, I want to be really clear as well here. It may not make a huge difference. It can depend on your own family circumstance. So this may not, I'm not encouraging someone to just go buy a new car, right? Or to make some kind of large purchase. All I'm saying is if you absolutely know you have a purchase upcoming in the very near future, you can be mindful about some, maybe putting let's just say a $5,000 down payment on a $25,000 car. That $5,000, payment that you make towards that vehicle would no longer you would have a $5,000 less savings asset to report on the FAFSA. And again, that would then, it could, again, $5,000 may not make a huge difference. If you want to pay cash for, maybe a very expensive car, then that could be a different consideration. So it would be, though, less money that is counted in the FAFSA, and it could potentially allow you to qualify for a little bit more financial aid. I mentioned this again, really, really important to report the net value of your assets. Not just the total value, so not just that $300,000 condo, but if you have a $200,000 mortgage on it, you're only reporting the net value of it. So you're subtracting the debt that you have. Any kind of 529 plan that is owned by someone who's not the parent, so whether it's a grandparent, whether it's another relative, a friend, that will not be considered as an asset on the FAFSA. And so it won't be included in the student aid index. Please ensure your family size is up to date if this is relevant for you, because family size does have a pretty important, very important determining factor in the overall aid and in reducing your student aid index. And then again, if your income has gone down, because colleges recognize, college financial officers recognized that 2 years ago, a lot can happen in 2 years. So if your income has gone down, if something has happened, then make sure you contact your financial aid office to submit an appeal. That is a huge update that they need to know. If you have extensive medical bills in the last 2 years, there are a variety of reasons where you can appeal your financial aid award. Okay, so that was the bulk of what I wanted to share with you. I'll spend a quick moment on the updates from last year to this year. So again, if you joined us for a presentation in the past, there's been several changes upcoming for July 1st, 2026. If there are any current college students or parents of current college students, you can still be eligible to borrow under the previous terms of the of federal policy. So the Parent Plus loan program has significant caps made to it starting July 1, 2026. So if you are a current high school senior, you will have to borrow under the new terms of the Parent Plus loan program. If you are a current college student or a parent of a current college student, the Parent Plus loan program is available to you under the old terms, or as you'll see in the slide, it's called current policy. So that means you can borrow up to the cost of attendance, and there's no lifetime limit. Now, under the new regulations, incoming students in the 2026-2027 academic year will have a cap of $20,000 per year for the Parent Plus loan program, with a lifetime limit of $65,000. So that means parents can only borrow on behalf of their children up to $65,000 total. This is a cap per child. So it does not mean that one parent can borrow $65,000 and then another parent can borrow $65,000 for that same student. It's regardless of which parent borrows, it's in the name for the student. The Parent Plus is in the name of the parent, but again, that's the lifetime cap that has now been set through federal regulations. So big updates on this program. Students can still borrow under the direct loan program. So that $5,500 per year for freshman year, $6,500 for sophomore year, and then $7,500 for junior and senior year. That is still intact. That hasn't changed, but the Parent PLUS loan program has changed significantly. So I'll just give a very quick update and quick update on Juno and the work that we do here. So I started learning about Juno because I'm a current graduate student myself. I'm a current MBA candidate at the Kellogg School of Management. Before this, I was actually previously a college counselor at Phillips Academy in Andover. It's a private boarding school in Massachusetts. So shout out to anyone in Massachusetts. I used to live there for quite a bit of time. And then before that, I was actually an admissions officer both at Yale University and Williams College. So throughout my career, I've seen the importance of college financing, financial aid, and the implications of what that means for students all throughout. I'm experiencing it myself in my own graduate school experience. I actually learned about Juno because I needed loans to take out for school. So I started my process as a user of Juno. So I'm speaking from experience. I've actually saved a lot on my loans in terms of the interest rate that I've gotten. So I love saving money. I love saving other people money. So that's actually how I got involved with Juno and found a role here after I needed Juno for my own loans. So I can speak from direct experience that it is a process of last resort to have to take out loans. Again, we always emphasize maximizing grants and scholarships, but the reality, especially with the upcoming federal caps on the Parent PLUS loan program, a lot of families will likely have to enter the private loan market. So what Juno does is bring together all the families that do need to take out if that's necessary, do need to borrow loans, and then leverages this collective bargaining power to negotiate with banks to get better rates as an entire group instead of going to a bank individually where you have absolutely no leverage. They'll just give you the rates that they give you. And so that's really the whole purpose of why Juno exists. Right now, through the end of April, we are building this negotiation group. So effectively, it's strength in numbers. The more families we have in this group, the better rates we're able to demand from lenders in that negotiation process. Their lenders are willing to make more concessions based on the volume that will come to them through all of us being part of this collective bargaining group. So that's where we are now. We're not expecting, we're not obligating families in any way. Juno is free for families. It always has been free. It always will be free for families. There's no cost. There's nowhere where we even collect any kind of financial information from you. There's no credit check when you sign up for Juno. It's not going to impact your credit whatsoever. Even if you do join the negotiation group, again, through up to April 30th, I hope you join now, but all the way up to April 30th, you're not obligated to take out a loan. Effectively, what you're signing up for is a mailing list that says, I agree to be contacted once Juno has negotiated this deal. And it's just giving you the option. You absolutely don't have to take it. Speaking from experience, it is oftentimes a very competitive, if not the most competitive option for a lot of families. And so that's all we're hoping for. We want families to be informed consumers in this process. We want you to shop around. Oftentimes, surprisingly, families don't always shop around as much as they should. And so what we hope for is just to be one of the options that you consider when you're going through this process. I'm happy to meet with any families. I've spoken to families all throughout the summer, one-on-one. You can reach out to me via email. We can set up a Zoom. You can meet with me multiple times. I've met with families on multiple occasions, multiple times, if any additional questions come up. But Juno is effectively just a free option that gives you access to the negotiated rates. Now, let me check here as well to see if there are any questions. Okay, in the Q&A. VA disability benefits, do those need to be reported as income as they are not included, they're not included on income tax returns? VA benefits are, they're untaxed income, I believe. I can follow up. I will follow up as well. I'm going to jot this question down. Uh, but any kind of income that you do receive is considered untaxed income. And so I do believe that still has to be reported. I will follow up with you just to confirm that, to ensure that I'm giving you the most appropriate and accurate answer. There's a question here on a child is actually in the year of graduating 2027. Welcome. There's a lot of excitement ahead for you. When do you apply for financial aid? Again, great question. Typically, colleges will ask you to apply by their stated deadlines at the latest. And so oftentimes it's around the time of admission. Maybe it could be a few days or a few weeks shortly thereafter. You can still submit the FAFSA if you don't know which colleges you're applying to yet. That's okay. You can still submit the FAFSA earlier on, as long as you know maybe one particular school that you will definitely apply to. At the very latest, I would say January. Oftentimes that's the school's deadlines, unless you apply through an early decision admissions program. Those deadlines will be much earlier in that case. But you can submit the FAFSA as early as the day it opens, October 1st. And the earlier, the better. Because again, there are funds that tend to run out that are limited. So this will be true, especially when you are applying for early programs, because those tend to attract a lot of students. There are colleges that have rolling admissions processes. So, by the time you apply, they may get back to you 2 weeks later. And if that's the case, let's say you do apply in October or November, as soon as you have that admissions decision, and even before, whenever you know the list of schools that you're applying to, submit the FAFSA. The earlier the better, because you want to maximize your chances to be considered for any kind of federal aid, limited federal aid that does run out. Not all of it runs out, but some types of federal aid, like the FSA grant, does run out. And that's that supplemental grant that's given to the students from the lowest income backgrounds. Generally, if you apply in, a few months after the FAFSA will open, you should be in good territory. I would not recommend waiting until March, April, May, June. Absolutely not, because by that point, a lot of the funds could be exhausted. Okay, this is another great question on if a step parent is the only income, but not the legal parent. Would the step parent be a contributor, or the legal parent, would they be the contributor? So this is going to depend on, and again, I'll highlight. Let me go back to it. So just want to emphasize this tool here on the slide. This exact scenario is one that is covered. So it will depend on whether or not you're married. So if there's a step parent, they are you will be married to them. So in that case, it will depend. I can get into. I'll just answer it quickly here. So between so I hope you don't mind if I use your name, but I'll just say Samantha. In this case, it will depend first. The first step is identifying between you and the other parent, the biological parent, I should say. So between you and the biological parent, first step is identifying amongst the two of you who provides 50% more 50% or more of the financial support for your child. Now, if it's you, then you are the contributor on the FAFSA. So forget step parent entirely right now. Between you and the other biological parent, if you provide 50% or more of the child's financial support, then you are the contributing parent on the FAFSA. If the other biological parent provides 50% or more of the financial support, they are considered the FAFSA contributor. And so let me take it one step further from here. So Samantha, if you provide more than 50% financial support and you're married to your current spouse, both of your financial information is then required for the FAFSA. So both your information and step parent information, so your current spouse, is going to be expected because you are married. You're currently married. Now, other scenario is if between you and other biological parent, if they provide more than 50% of financial support for the child, they are considered the FAFSA contributing parent, and their information is what's used, not your information, not your spouse's information. Only the other biological parent is included. So I hope that was clear. I was trying to use my hands to signal each parent, but this exact scenario is covered in this tool. So if you have any additional scenarios, you can test it out. Please make use of the great resources that are available. I don't see any other questions. I'll give it just a moment here if folks need to think, just to give folks a few more moments. If you have any questions, let's feel free to post it in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come through. If you think of something later on, don't be a stranger. Please feel free to reach out. I'll email you directly early next week with a link to the presentation, so you get a recording of the presentation. I'll send the PowerPoint. I'll send the actual presentation itself, so you have all the links and you can refer back to this. If you are also interested in joining us for our future webinars, then again, I encourage you to check out our website. I'm going to post it in the chat as well. Hopefully you can see that. And then feel free to join us again next week, the week thereafter. We're going to continue to host more of these webinars throughout the next several weeks, next several months, especially as more families turn their attention to the financial aid process. And then we talk about, again, understanding your student aid index, how to calculate that. We also address appealing your financial aid award. So hope to see you soon. Again, tune in again. Joinjuno.com/webinars is our link, and hope to see you in another webinar soon. Have a great night, everyone.